When you close your eyes and picture humanitarian aid, what's the very first image that hits your retina? Be honest.
It's probably a blanket.
It's a blanket.
Yeah.
Or maybe a heavy bag of maize meal, a first aid kit, or one of those white Land Cruisers bouncing over a washed-out road.
That's the classic iconography. It's tangible, it's physical. You can, touch it, weigh it, take a picture of it.
Exactly. But today, strictly based on the source material we have, the Zambia Red Cross Society's data protection policy, versions 2.0 and 2.2, plus their sharing agreements and impact guides, we are pivoting hard. We're looking at an asset that is invisible, weightless, but potentially just as dangerous as a weapon if it's mishandled in a conflict zone. We're talking about data.
And I want to be clear right off the bat, we aren't just talking about spreadsheets for the sake of bureaucracy.
Yeah.
This isn't just about complying with the Zambia Data Protection Act of 2021, though that is, the legal backbone here. This is about the fundamental humanitarian principle of do no harm.
That's really the mission for this deep dive. We are going to explore how an organization whose entire reason for existing is to save lives has to balance two opposing forces.
It's a real paradox.
It is. On one hand, they have a desperate, screaming need for information. Who is hurt? Where are they? What do they need? But on the other hand, there's this massive lurking risk that the same information could destroy the very people they are trying to help.
It's the ultimate high-wire act, and frankly, the stakes are often higher with the data than with the physical goods.
How so?
Well, if you lose a truck of food, people go hungry, which is terrible. But if you lose a hard drive full of names and political affiliations in a civil unrest zone, people could be targeted.
So let's start with the philosophy before we get into the tech. The policy refers to data as a humanitarian act. That sounds noble, but what does it actually mean on the ground?
It means that data responsibility isn't an IT problem, it's a trust problem.
A trust problem.
Yeah, if you look at the introduction of the policy, it sets the stakes immediately. To design an aid program, you need data. You need to know that Village A needs water, and Village B needs medicine. But if you collect that data irresponsibly, you don't just lose a file.
You lose the trust of the community.
And in a crisis, if you lose trust, you lose access. Precisely. You can't deliver the water if the village closes its gates because they think you're leaking their private info to a hostile group.
So the policy ties this directly to the fundamental Red Cross principles: humanity, impartiality,
neutrality, all of that. It frames data protection not as compliance, but as a way to maintain that neutrality.
I found one section in the Do No Harm chapter that was particularly striking. It felt like a hard stop.
I think I know the one you mean.
It said that if a risk analysis shows significant danger to the data subjects, the people being helped, the organization has to, and I quote, refrain from executing the project.
It's a powerful clause, and it's very rare to see it written that explicitly.
But pause on that for a second. Let's say they have the funding.
Yeah.
They have the donors lined up. They have the trucks loaded with food. People are hungry, but the data risk is too high. They actually pull the plug.
According to the policy, yes, that is the hard line. If gathering the necessary list of beneficiaries puts those beneficiaries in danger, say, by creating a list of a persecuted minority group that could be seized,
You just can't do it.
you cannot do the project. They treat digital privacy as a physical safety issue. If the data puts them in the crosshairs, you don't collect the data, even if it means halting the aid.
That redefines the whole concept of aid. It acknowledges that sometimes silence is safer than food. Now, obviously, to process any of this data when they do go ahead, they need a legal basis. I saw consent as the big one. But surely in a flood or a war zone, you aren't walking around with a clipboard asking for signatures.
No, and the policy accounts for that harsh reality. While informed consent is the gold standard, there are other lawful grounds. The most dramatic one is vital interests.
Vital interest. That sounds like a spy movie title.
It's the legal term for life and death situations. If you find someone unconscious and bleeding, you don't wait for them to wake up and sign a form.
Right.
You process their ID to find their medical history, their blood type, and you save their life. The law allows that because the vital interest of the subject staying alive outweighs the procedural requirement.
That makes sense. It's the common sense clause.
Then there's public interest, which covers things like large-scale disaster relief, and legal obligation, where the law explicitly requires it. But the default setting, the one they always strive for, is to get consent if they physically can.
Okay, so we know why they collect it. Now I want to look at what they are collecting, because when I hear personal data, I'm thinking name, email, phone number. But the distinction this document makes between personal data and sensitive personal data is crucial.
It is, and that distinction dictates the level of security required. Standard personal data is what you'd expect. Name, sex, date of birth, ID number, maybe an IP address.
But sensitive personal data is where the danger lies. Give us the list. What makes the cut?
Okay, so this includes racial or ethnic origin, political opinions, religious beliefs, health status, and even information about a person's sex life or sexual orientation.
In a stable democracy, that stuff is private, sure. But in a conflict zone, that stuff can be a target list.
Exactly. If a militia is targeting a specific ethnic group, and you have a spreadsheet listing every member of that group in the region, that spreadsheet is a weapon.
Wow.
If you know who holds specific political views in a volatile election year, that data is dynamite.
This leads me to a term in the definitions I hadn't seen before. Demographically identifiable information, or DII.
Ah, yes.
This wasn't about identifying a person, but a group.
Right. This is a very nuanced concept. DII refers to data that identifies a distinct community, geographic, ethnic, religious. The insight here is that you might protect the individual. You delete the name John Doe. But if the data reveals that village A is 95% from ethnic group X, you have put the entire village at risk.
So even if I don't know who you are, if I know where you are and what your group believes, I can target your community.
Yes. The policy warns explicitly that this information can cause group harm. It forces the aid worker to think beyond individual privacy and look at community safety.
Which brings us to the mosaic effect. This was in the anonymization section. Sounds like an art project, but the description was actually kind of terrifying.
The mosaic effect is one of the most difficult challenges in modern data privacy. The idea is that you can take one data set that looks completely harmless and anonymous.
No names.
No names. Then you take a second data set, also looks harmless. But if you overlay them, if you tile them together like a mosaic, you can use the intersecting points to re-identify individuals.
Can you give me an example of how that would work in this context?
Sure. Imagine dataset A tells you that a 35-year-old male was treated for a specific injury in Village X on Tuesday. No name. Looks safe, right?
Right.
But dataset B, maybe a public social media post or a local news report mentions that the local school teacher in Village X was in a motorcycle accident on Tuesday.
Boom. Now you know the school teacher has that specific injury, and you can link his medical record to his identity.
Exactly. The sum is more dangerous than the parts. The policy warns that they have to be incredibly careful not just about what data they hold, but what happens if it gets matched with outside information.
It's like playing 4D chess with information security. You have to anticipate what other data exists in the world.
You do.
So, knowing all these risks, what tools are they actually allowed to use? I assume they aren't just writing things on the back of a napkin.
Well, ironically, sometimes paper is used, but the policy is strict. It has to be digitized and then shredded. But for digital collection, they have a toolkit of approved methods, things like Kobo Toolbox, ODK, and MWater.
Those are pretty standard in the NGO world. But I want to talk about the section that felt a bit more sci-fi. Drones, or UAVs.
Unmanned aerial vehicles, yes.
Yeah.
They are incredibly useful for mapping disaster zones or assessing flood damage, but the policy highlights some very specific vulnerabilities.
Read just the regulatory stuff. I saw mentions of the Civil Aviation Authority.
Well, that's heavy. You need compliance with the ZCAA and ZZCTA. But technically, the risk they are most worried about is spoofing.
Spoofing, that's when someone hijacks the signal.
Essentially. The policy warns that UAVs are susceptible to unauthorized persons taking over the wireless control link. Imagine you're mapping a sensitive area and suddenly someone else lands your drone and takes the SD card.
Or they just wait for it to crash.
That too. They aren't theft-proof. If a drone crashes with data on board, anyone who picks it up owns that data.
Okay, so whether it comes from a drone or a phone, the data has to go somewhere. And this is where we see a bit of a battle of the tech giants in the policy document.
It is a bit of a showdown, isn't it? There's a clear winner and a very clear loser.
Who takes the gold medal?
OneDrive and SharePoint. They're listed as the standard and most secure online storage option for the organization.
And the loser?
Google Drive.
That was surprisingly blunt. I felt bad for Google reading it.
It was. The policy is explicit. Google Drive is not to be used for storage of personal data.
Why? Is it a security thing?
It cites the lack of metadata control and different security protocols compared to their enterprise standard. It's not that Google is bad, but for their specific environment, it just doesn't meet the criteria.
And I noticed they also have a vendetta against USB sticks.
With good reason.
Oh.
External hard drives and USB sticks are the easiest things in the world to lose. The policy discourages them entirely unless they are encrypted. If you drop a USB stick in a cafe and it has a list of beneficiaries on it, that's a catastrophe.
It's a breach waiting to happen. Speaking of security hygiene, there was one piece of advice regarding smartphones that I honestly think everyone listening should adopt right now.
The pattern locks.
Yes, I've been using a pattern lock for years. I thought I was clever. Oh,
And-
nobody will guess this shape.
And the policy says, don't use them. And the reason isn't digital hacking, it's pure Sherlock Holmes deduction.
It's the grease, right?
It's the smudge. The policy explicitly says your fingerprints on the screen may reveal your pattern. If you hold someone's phone up to the light, you can often see the shape traced in the oil on the glass.
That is such a simple physical vulnerability. You don't need to be a hacker, you just need good lighting.
So they recommend numerical codes instead. It's harder to guess from a smudge because the order of the numbers isn't revealed.
And then there's the encryption stuff for laptops. Full disk encryption, I get. That protects you if the laptop is off. But they also mentioned two-layer encryption.
This is for the really sensitive stuff. The idea is that one password gets you into the laptop, but that's not enough. To open the specific folders with beneficiary data, you need a second, different password.
It's like a bank vault inside the bank.
Exactly. It protects against the scenario where someone forces you to unlock your laptop. You unlock the machine, but the sensitive files remain inaccessible behind that second wall.
So we've got the tools, we've got the security, now the process. How do they actually decide if a project is safe to start? There's an acronym that kept popping up, DPIA.
The Data Protection Impact Assessment. This is the heavy lifting of compliance. It's a formal process to check if a project is too risky before it begins.
Like a pre-flight check for a pilot. When do they have to use it?
The policy has specific triggers. If you are using new technology, doing systematic monitoring like tracking people, or if you're processing that sensitive data we talked about.
Health, political views.
Right. If you hit any of those, you must run a DPIA.
And what is the test? What are they asking themselves?
They conduct a necessity and proportionality analysis. They ask, do we actually need this data to help? Is it proportional to the benefit?
So if I'm handing out bags of rice, do I really need to know your political party?
No. And if you ask for it, you are violating the policy. It's about data minimization. If you don't need it, don't collect it.
This leads us back to consent. We touched on the legal side, but practically, how do you get informed consent in rural Zambia? Because language barriers are real.
It's difficult. The policy mandates that consent must be informed, freely given, and revocable. But the crucial part is language. The policy explicitly states that consent forms must be translated into a language the subject understands.
You can't just shove a legal document in English in front of someone who speaks Bemba or Nanja.
Exactly. If they can't read it, it's not informed consent, it's just a signature. The burden is on the organization to bridge that communication gap.
And freely given implies they can say no. But if I'm starving and the person with the food asks for my data, I'm not going to say no.
That is the power imbalance they have to manage. The policy emphasizes voluntary participation. The beneficiary must know that saying no won't stop them from getting aid unless that data is strictly operational, like a phone number for a mobile money transfer.
Right.
But generally, you cannot hold aid hostage for data.
There was one interesting exception to the revocable rule, meaning you can take your consent back. It was in Annex F regarding media.
Ah, yes, the photos.
It basically said, if we take your photo and put it on a poster, you can't take it back.
It's a practical reality. You can't unprint 1,000 posters. You can't recall every flyer. The consent forms are very transparent about that. They manage expectations up front. Once this is public, it's public.
Now, the Red Cross doesn't work in a vacuum. They work with the government, with other NGOs. Can they just email a spreadsheet of patients to the Ministry of Health?
Definitely not. Sharing is heavily regulated. They use Template D, the data sharing agreement. They share with government bodies like the DMMU, but only under strict legal contracts.
And this is where the concept of local knowledge came in, which I thought was really smart.
Yes. The policy stresses consulting with local experts or community leaders to understand risk. A data set that looks harmless to an international worker from Geneva might be very dangerous in the local context.
Because the international worker doesn't know that this specific surname is associated with that rival plan.
Exactly. You need the local lens to see the hidden dangers in the data. You can't assess risk from a desk in a different continent.
I want to clear up one technical distinction before we finish. Anonymization versus pseudonymization. I feel like people use these interchangeably, but the policy treats them very differently.
They are very different mechanisms. Think of anonymization as a shredder. You strip the identifier's names, IDs, and you destroy the link forever. It is irreversible.
And pseudonymization.
Think of that as a locker. You take the name John Doe and replace it with code 123. You can still analyze code 123's progress. And if you have the key to the locker, you can look up who code 123 is.
But the safety relies on keeping the key safe.
Precisely. The key must be kept separate from the data. If the key is stolen along with the data, the protection is gone.
But let's be real. Despite all this, things go wrong.
Yeah.
Humans make mistakes. What happens when there is a breach?
First, we have to define a breach. It's not just a guy in a hoodie hacking the server. A breach is losing a paper file. It's sending an email to the wrong recipient. It's leaving a laptop on a bus.
So mostly human error.
Almost always. And the rule is the 24-hour rule.
Speed is everything.
Any breach must be reported to the PMER department or IT within 24 hours. You cannot sit on it. You cannot try to fix it yourself quietly.
Because every minute you wait is a minute the data subjects are at risk?
Exactly. It emphasizes a culture of responsibility over a culture of blame. You have to report it to mitigate the damage. If you lost a USB stick with medical records, they need to know now so they can take steps to protect those people.
So, stepping back and looking at this entire document, it feels like a constant state of tension.
It is. The Zambia Red Cross is operating in a space where they need speed, they need to move fast to save lives, but this policy forces them to apply friction security protocols, impact assessments, encryption keys.
But that friction isn't there to be annoying.
No. The summary of the policy puts it beautifully. It says, data subjects are entitled to dignity and not to be put at risk.
Dignity. That's the word that sticks with me. It's about respecting the person behind the number.
It's realizing that in the 21st century, protecting someone's data is part of protecting your life. You can't say you're saving them if your negligence puts them on a target list.
Before we sign off, I want to leave you, the listener, with a thought. We talked about the mosaic effect, how the Red Cross is terrified that combining two innocent lists can endanger a village.
It's a powerful concept to keep in mind.
Think about that in your own life. We sprinkle data about ourselves everywhere. Social media, shopping loyalty cards, public records, fitness trackers. If a humanitarian organization is worried about what happens when those lists combine, what does the combination of our public data say about us? Who is building a mosaic out of your life right now?
That is a very provocative question.
Something to chew on next time you blindly click I agree. Thanks for diving deep with us today.
Stay safe and keep your passwords long.
See you next time.